There is a lot to be said for ad-libbing in movies, though it can quickly cause a scene to spiral out of control if not kept in check. When done right, it's allowed for some of the most iconic lines and moments in all of cinema. And on rare occasions, it can even cause characters who weren't supposed to have a large role to completely steal the spotlight, with one of the best examples of that being Caddyshack. Chevy Chase, Bill Murray, and Rodney Dangerfield were only supposed to have one-scene cameos, but Harold Ramis loved what they were doing so much that he expanded their parts and let them run wild, causing them to take over the movie in the process. And if you'd like to hear more about that, I already covered it in a separate video, which you can find a link in the description too. But one place where you'll almost never see this happen is in animation, since all the lines have to be recorded ahead of time and usually well into the storyboarding process, which often leaves limited room for improvising. But there are most definitely exceptions to this, as an actor's presence in an animated movie has on occasion caused the story to be changed so their character could have more focus. And today, I'd like to go over one of the most effective examples of this phenomenon, with that being King Julian from Madagascar. And there will be spoilers for this movie ahead, so in case you haven't seen it yet and don't want anything ruined, you might want to come back to this video another day. Okay, so to start off simply, yes, King Julian wasn't supposed to have a big part in the first Madagascar movie. Originally, Maurice was supposed to be the leader of the lemurs, and the character that would become King Julian was only supposed to have 2 lines, with the writers thinking it would be funny if Sacha Baron Cohen spoke them in a cameo role. However, once he got in the recording booth, Conan went wild, as he is known to do, and improvised both King Julian's odd accent as well as 8 minutes of dialogue. And the creators found it all so funny that they quickly realized it would be a complete waste of Conan's talents to go with the script as it was. So they rewrote it to have his character be the goofy and borderline insane leader of the lemurs, while Maurice was relegated to the part of his right-hand man and voice of reason. And while King Julian was, after this rewrite, given a motivation behind his actions and an important role to play in the plot, the essence of the character still came from Sacha Baron Cohen's initial recording turned ad-libbing session. And, as any fan of the Madagascar series will long already know, this decision turned out to be a very good one, as King Julian ended up completely stealing the movie from everyone except maybe the penguins, and easily became one of the franchise's most popular characters. And as a result, they made sure to give him a large role in both sequels and most spin-off material, and especially when Sacha Baron Cohen is voicing him always proves to be a standout. Because simply put, there's only one King Julian, and most people can't get enough of him. And one has to admit, that's not bad for a character who wasn't even supposed to exist in the first place. But that being said, the original plan for King Julian, or more accurately Maurice, does show in the final product. Because as I got into in another video, which you can also find a link in the description to, the Fusa have very little characterization, and most notably have no leader that's a counterpart to King Julian. And that's a big indicator of where the narrative was originally going to go, because depicting the lemurs as having such an odd, eccentric ruler almost seems like a prime setup for their enemy to have either a similar kind of leader or a much more competent one. In other words, depending on how they wanted the story to go, and especially depending on how funny or serious it was intended to be, you'd think it was almost a given that the leader of the Fusas would not only be depicted, but either be exactly like King Julian or his complete opposite. Again, depending on the direction of the story. But instead, the Fusa are depicted as just one step above wild animals in terms of intelligence, with absolutely no leader to speak of. Now you might be wondering, what's my point here? That the Fusa's lack of characterization and leader is much more in line with how the dynamic between them and the lemurs was supposed to go, because Maurice was originally written to be a competent leader and straight man. Basically, he was more or less the same character you see in the finished film, only he was in charge and came up with the plan of recruiting Alex instead of being the only one against it. And because his character isn't, shall we say, nearly as colorful as King Julian's, it makes sense that the Fusa were written the way they were. With King Julian as the leader, though, it would have made more sense, again, whether for comedy or drama, that the leader of the Fusa be depicted too. Though I'm not saying the way they're portrayed in the final film is a bad thing or anything like that, just that it reflects on the original idea for the characters. But either way, the point here is that if it weren't for Sacha Baron Cohen, there would simply be no King Julian, as he pretty much invented the character single-handedly, and the creators realized it was just too good of an opportunity to pass up, which most can agree was definitely for the best. But funnily enough, even after they rewrote the movie to give King Julian a bigger part, Conan still wasn't done improvising. Because originally, the song I Like to Move It was supposed to only be used as an instrumental. But during a recording session, Conan came up with his own lyrics on the spot, and they decided to actually have the characters sing it in the movie. And once again, considering how popular that song went on to become, they definitely made the right call. And finally, at the end of the movie, after King Julian gives Alex his crown, everything he says about his new crown having a gecko on it was another late ad-lib by Conan. And everybody found it so funny that they actually went to the trouble of creating a gecko model and animating it for the scene. And that's no exaggeration. Everything King Julian says about the gecko in that scene was done on the spot by Conan and wasn't in the script. So I guess you could say that in the end, Sacha Baron Cohen was responsible for the creation of 2 characters in Madagascar, especially if you take the gag involving the gecko from the sequel into account, as that obviously wouldn't have been put in had he not initially ad-libbed it. So like I said at the start, though it is rare, there are times even in animated movies where an actor's improvising can cause their character to have a much bigger role than was originally intended. Though, of course, in the case of King Julian, it mainly came down to Sacha Baron Cohen's geniusness as a comedian and the writers deciding to run with it instead of holding him back. So if there's really anything to be taken away from that, it would honestly be that if you want your movie to be funny, let Sacha Baron Cohen do whatever the heck he wants and go from there. But in all seriousness, the point is that sometimes the key to success in movies can come from the most unlikely of places, and a good filmmaker knows when they have a good thing going for them, whether it's scripted or not. Okay, I think that's everything I had to say on that. So now I'd like to hear what you guys think. Do you believe that ad-libbing is just as good in animation as it is in live action? Or do you believe it's better when the voice actors stick to the script, barring exceptions like Robin Williams as the genie? And do you believe it was a good thing that King Julian ended up becoming such an important character, or not? Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And like I always say, you don't have to agree with this video just because you watched it. You're entitled to your own opinion, and if you think I've got it all wrong, that's perfectly okay. And thank you all for watching. I greatly appreciate all of it, and I hope to see you all next time.